My wife betrayed me with my best friend, secretly signing our house over to him for just $10, $0, then filed fraudulent lawsuits claiming I stole $250, $0 from our joint account. I found out too late to stop her. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get like this, but I did. The craziest part. It all started with a gut feeling, then a few small things that didn't quite add up, and ended with the kind of betrayal you only see in movies. Honestly, I still can't believe how everything unraveled so fast and how deep the rabbit hole went. My wife Lisa and I had been together for about 6 years. We got married right out of college, both of us ambitious, trying to build something solid. She always came off as confident, a little bitchy sometimes, but I thought that was just her attitude, sharp, quick-witted, a little ruthless when she wanted to be. She was the kind of woman who could charm her way out of anything but also had a sharp tongue when she was annoyed. I loved her, or I thought I did. At the start, everything seemed normal. We had our ups and downs, sure, but nothing that made me suspicious. She was a little secretive about her phone sometimes, but I brushed it off as her being private. Still, I noticed small things, late nights on her laptop, strange calls she'd hide from me, and her suddenly being very interested in our finances, which was weird because she used to be pretty careless about money. One day, I came home early from work because I was feeling off. I usually worked late, but I had a weird feeling, so I decided to surprise her. When I got home, I noticed the front door was unlocked, odd because she always locked up tight. I called out her name and I didn't hear a response at first. That's when I noticed her car wasn't in the driveway. I checked the living room, the bedroom, nothing. That's when I saw her phone on the coffee table, screen lit up with a message from someone named Mike that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach sank. I knew that name. Mike was her, at least I thought he was. She mentioned him casually a few times, but I never really paid much attention. I looked closer and saw more messages, flirty, suggestive, talking about meeting up after work. My heart started pounding. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my partner, was cheating on me with someone I thought was just a friend. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I decided to follow her just to see where she was going. I knew she'd be lying if I confronted her right then, so I took my car and followed her to a fancy downtown hotel. I saw her go in with Mike, laughing and holding hands like they were on their honeymoon. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a fling, they were serious. I stayed in the parking lot watching through the windows, feeling numb. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. How could she do this to me? After everything we built? I thought about all the nights I stayed late at work, all the times I tried to trust her, only to find out she was sleeping with my best friend. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let this go, not without exposing her. The next day, I started digging into her phone and our finances. She was hiding stuff, secret accounts, shady transfers, and most shocking of all, she had secretly signed over our house to Mike for just 10 grand. $10,000. That's practically theft. I found legal documents that showed she'd transferred ownership without my knowledge or consent. How did I miss all this? I felt like I'd been living in a nightmare, and I didn't even see the trap until it was too late. But it wasn't just about the house. She also filed fraudulent lawsuits claiming I stole $250,000 from our joint account. I looked into it and found court papers, fake signatures, manipulated bank statements, everything. She was trying to ruin me financially, probably to cover her tracks or to make me look like the villain. I couldn't believe she'd go this far. It was like she'd planned this whole betrayal for months. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My mind raced with questions. How long has this been going on? How much did she manipulate me? And worst of all, how do I fight back against someone who's willing to destroy everything I care about? I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without a fight. I had to figure out how to stop her before she completely ruined me. That's where I am now, trying to piece everything together, dealing with the shock and anger and wondering how I let it get this far. If anyone's been through something similar, I could really use some advice. Because right now, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into a mess I'll never recover from. After I uncovered everything, The house transfer, the lawsuits, the fake signatures. I felt like my world was collapsing. It was surreal. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to make sense of how Lisa managed to pull this off without me catching on sooner. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all those signs? How could she be so cold and calculated? And worst of all, how could she lie so effortlessly? I knew I had to confront her. There was no way I could just let her keep spinning her web of lies. The moment I decided to face her, I realized I needed a plan. I couldn't just storm in and accuse her without proof. She was good at lying, and I was sure she'd deny everything. I had to be smart about this. I started by gathering all the evidence I could find, screenshots of the messages, copies of the legal documents, bank statements, everything. I wanted her to see I wasn't bluffing. I also decided I needed backup, someone who could help me understand what I was dealing with and maybe even help me fight her legally. I reached out to a lawyer I knew from work, a guy named Mark who specialized in family law and financial crimes. He was skeptical at first, but when I showed him the documents, his eyes widened. Mark told me that what Lisa did was serious. Signing over the house without my knowledge is a legal act, and trying to frame me with a fake lawsuit is fraud. He said I had grounds to sue her for fraud, breach of trust, and perhaps even criminal charges if I wanted to pursue it. But he warned me, too, that the emotional toll would be huge. I was already feeling drained, angry, betrayed, and deeply hurt. Still, I knew I could. Let her get away with it. The next step was to get her to admit something. I decided to confront her at home. I waited until I knew she'd be back from work. When she walked in, I was sitting in the living room with all the evidence spread out on the table. She looked surprised, but then that bitchy smile crept back on her face. "Oh, so you've been snooping," she said, rolling her eyes. "You really think you're smart, don't you?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "Lisa, I know everything. The house, the lawsuits, the fake signatures. How could you do this to me? After everything we've been through?" She scoffed. "You're overreacting. This is all a misunderstanding. You're just jealous because I've been busy at work and I've got a life outside of you. You're so insecure, it's pathetic." I felt my blood boil. I pressed her further, demanding to know why she betrayed me, why she signed over our house to Mike for just $10,000. Her response: she said it was a business deal, that she was trying to protect us from some imaginary financial trouble I supposedly caused. She lied so smoothly I almost believed her at first. But then I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes and I knew she was lying. That conversation didn't last long. I told her I had all the evidence and I was done being played. I told her I'd be taking legal action and I wanted her out of the house immediately. She tried to deny everything, but I wasn't having it. I felt a mixture of rage and sadness. Rage because she'd betrayed me so completely, and sadness because I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. The emotional impact hit me hard. I'd been by a woman I trusted, someone I shared my life with. I kept asking myself, how did I miss the signs? How could she lie so well? I felt like a fool for not noticing the cracks earlier. I started questioning everything: our relationship, her motives, whether I ever truly knew her at all. But I also knew I had to move forward. I couldn't let her drag me down any longer. I told her she had a week to leave the house, and I'd be working with my lawyer to file the necessary papers. I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I was finally taking control, and dread because I knew this was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight. As I packed some of my things that night, I couldn't help but think about how everything changed so fast. One moment I was happily married, trusting her with everything. The next, I was fighting to save what was left of my life. I wondered how she could be so callous, so manipulative. I wondered how many other lies she told, how much of our life was just a... Looking back, I realized that the emotional scars are going to take a long time to heal. But I also know I can't let her win. I've got to rebuild, to move on from this nightmare. Still, part of me feels broken, like I trusted the wrong person all along, and that trust was shattered beyond repair. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't let her destroy me completely. I'll fight for what's mine, for my dignity, and for a fresh start. After she finally left the house, her bags packed in a rush, her face a mix of anger and disdain, I felt like I was standing in a storm I couldn't escape. The house was eerily silent without her, and for the first time in years, I was alone in a space that once felt like a fortress. But inside, I was anything but calm. My mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts: anger, betrayal, confusion, fear. I kept replaying everything she'd told me, every lie she'd spun, and I kept asking myself how I'd missed all of it for so long. The hardest part wasn't just the betrayal, it was the feeling that I'd been played for a fool. I thought I knew Lisa, my wife, my partner. But she was a different person all along, hiding her true motives behind a mask of charm and bitchy wit. She lied about her job, about her feelings, about her intentions. And the worst part, she'd been planning her escape for months, maybe even longer, while I was obliviously trusting her. Once she was gone, I started going through everything I had: old emails, bank statements, messages. I needed to get a clearer picture of just how deep her deception went. That's when I found more evidence: small things she overlooked or forgot to delete, hidden texts with Mike, secret transfers to accounts I never knew about, and documentation showing she signed over the house without my knowledge. It was all there, laid out in black and white, and I couldn't believe how meticulous she'd been in covering her tracks. I also reached out to my lawyer, Mark, again. We scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss the next steps. It was straightforward. What Lisa did was illegal, and I had every right to fight her in court. But he warned me that this wasn't just about money. It was about my reputation, my sanity, and my future. She'd lied so convincingly, I had to be prepared for a battle that could drag on for months. Still, I knew I had to fight. I couldn't let her get away with stealing my house, framing me, and trying to destroy everything I had built. The next few days were a blur of planning and emotional turmoil. I started documenting everything, taking screenshots, copying documents, writing down every detail I remembered. I also contacted a private investigator just to confirm some of my suspicions. I needed proof beyond the legal documents, proof that she was actively manipulating and lying. The investigator was expensive, but I figured it was worth it. I needed to know just how far she'd go. Meanwhile, the legal process kicked off. My lawyer filed a cease and desist order against her, demanding she stop all legal proceedings related to the house and the lawsuit. We also prepared to challenge the fraudulent lawsuit she filed, if she even tried to go through with it. I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I was finally taking action, but dread because I knew this was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight. Throughout all this, I couldn't help but feel the emotional weight pressing down on me. I was angry at her, furious that she'd betrayed me so completely. I was hurt deeply because I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all the signs? How could I have been so blind? And then a darker thought crept in: was it even love or just habit? Had I been fooling myself all along? There was one moment that hit me hard. I was sitting alone in the house, staring at the empty space where she used to be, and I realized I'd lost more than just a wife. I'd lost my sense of safety, my trust in people, my peace of mind. I'd been so caught up in the idea of a future with her that I never saw her true intentions. She played me like a pawn in her game, but amid the chaos I also felt a flicker of resolve. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine: my house, my reputation, my dignity. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I knew she'd come back swinging with more lies and manipulation. But I was done being the victim. I was done letting her control everything. That night I sat down and started writing a detailed timeline of everything I knew: every suspicious event, every lie, every financial move she made. It was my way of taking back some control. I didn't sleep much after that. My mind kept racing, replaying every moment, trying to anticipate her next move. I felt like I'd entered a war I didn't want, but I had no choice but to fight it. In the end, I knew this wasn't just about money or the house. It was about respect, about standing up for myself after being so thoroughly betrayed. I'd trusted her, I'd given her my life, and now I had to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. Even if I lost everything, I told myself I'd come out of this stronger. I had to, because if I didn't, she'd win. And I refused to be that guy who was taken down by the woman he loved. The legal battle started to take shape after I handed everything over to Mark. We filed the necessary paperwork to contest her fraudulent lawsuit and challenge her claim to the house. Honestly, I felt like I was fighting for my life. Every document, every email, every piece of paper was a weapon in this war. I knew Lisa was clever, probably more manipulative than I realized, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. Still, that didn't make it any easier to stomach the fact that she had gone so far to ruin me. While the legal process was unfolding, I couldn't help but think about the emotional toll. I was angry, but I was also deeply hurt. I kept replaying our last conversation before she left. Her words, so dismissive, so full of lies, still haunted me. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was overreacting, that she only did all this to protect us. Even though I knew better, she'd lied so many times I'd lost count. I felt like I'd been living with a different person, someone I didn't recognize anymore. One of the hardest parts was realizing how much I'd trusted her. I mean, I really believed we had something real. I thought she loved me, but her actions showed otherwise. She was willing to destroy everything we built, our house, our savings, our reputation, all for some guy, Mike. That sickening realization made me question everything about our relationship. Were there signs I missed? Did I ignore the warning flags, or was she just that good at hiding her true self? In the meantime, I also started to focus on my own mental health. I spoke to a counselor just to get some perspective. It helped to vent and hear someone else validate what I was going through. I told her everything, how I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. She told me to focus on what I could control and to avoid making rash decisions. But honestly, at that point, I felt like my life was out of control. Everything I knew was crumbling. I also decided to get a private investigator to look into Lisa's financial dealings more thoroughly. Turns out, she'd been funneling money into secret accounts, some in fake names, to hide assets. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe longer. The investigator told me she'd been talking to lawyers, real estate agents, and maybe even planning to leave the country if she could. That was a slap in the face. She'd been preparing to run from everything we had, all while pretending to be the perfect wife. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply she'd lied and manipulated. She signed over the house for just 10 grand, a fraction of its real value, and used the money to fund her new life with Mike. Meanwhile, she'd also set me up with a fake lawsuit to drain my funds and ruin my reputation. It was cold, calculated, and ruthless. I felt like I was fighting against a chess master who had planned every move months ahead. I knew I had to do something drastic, something to make her pay, not just legally but emotionally. I couldn't stand the thought of her walking away with everything, smiling, while I was left picking up the pieces. That's when I started planning my revenge, but not in a petty way. I wanted her to see that karma isn't always slow. Sometimes it hits hard and fast. I decided I'd expose her lies publicly but carefully. I wanted people to see the real Lisa, the manipulative, selfish woman who'd betray her own husband for some cheap thrill. I began collecting proof to share with friends, family, and even some mutual acquaintances. I knew it might destroy her reputation, but honestly, she deserved it. She'd lied to everyone, including her own family, about her perfect marriage. I wanted them to see the truth. Meanwhile, I also started to emotionally detach myself. It was hard, especially since I still had feelings, conflicted feelings. Part of me still wanted to believe she'd come clean, that she'd realize her mistakes and try to fix things. But deep down, I knew that was wishful thinking. She'd gone too far. The Lisa I loved was gone, replaced by someone who was willing to betray everything for her own gain. The worst part was realizing how much my trust had been shattered. I used to think honesty and loyalty were the foundation of any relationship. Now, I see that people can hide their true selves behind a mask for years. I felt naive, stupid even. But I also knew I had to be strong and move forward, no matter how much it hurt. So I kept pushing forward, working with my lawyer, gathering evidence, and preparing for the inevitable court battle. I knew Lisa would fight dirty, probably try to spin stories, and do everything she could to save herself. But I wasn't going to let her win that easily. I was determined to fight for my house, my reputation, and my peace of mind. I was tired of feeling helpless. This was my fight now, and I was ready to see it through, even if it meant losing sleep or facing more heartbreak. Honestly, I don't know what the future holds, but I've learned some hard lessons. Trust is fragile, and people can surprise you in the worst ways. I've also learned that sometimes you have to be your own hero. Nobody's coming to save you. If you're in a situation like this, my advice is to gather your evidence, stay calm, and get legal help ASAP. Don't let anyone manipulate or gaslight you. And above all, don't lose sight of yourself. Because at the end of the day, your integrity is all you really have. The court date finally arrived after months of legal back and forth. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread walking into that courtroom. On one hand, I knew I had everything in order, the evidence, the legal backing, the truth. On the other hand, I was painfully aware that Lisa was cunning, and she'd do anything to spin things her way. I looked across the room and saw her smirking, that bitchy smile that had haunted me since the day I found out her lies. She thought she was untouchable, but I was done playing her game. Mark, my lawyer, laid out our case clearly, proof of the house transfer, the fraudulent lawsuit, the secret accounts, and her attempts to hide assets. Lisa's lawyer tried to deny everything, of course, claiming I was paranoid, that I was jealous, that I was trying to sabotage her. But Mark was relentless, presenting every piece of evidence meticulously, showing the court how calculated her moves had been. I felt a surge of pride that I'd managed to gather all this, even amid my heartbreak. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the documents, asking pointed questions. I could see Lisa squirming, trying to maintain her composure, but her lies were starting to unravel. When Mark finished, the judge paused, then announced that he would need time to review everything before making a ruling. That was a small victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. Lisa would probably appeal or try to come up with more tricks to save herself. After the hearing, I stayed behind for a moment and looked at Lisa. I saw her eyes flickering with anger and frustration. I wanted to say something, something that would cut her down, but I knew it wouldn't help. Instead, I just told her that I'd be fighting for my rights and that she'd regret the day she ever crossed me. Her face twisted into a sneer, but I didn't care. I'd done my part. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt exhausted but also strangely empowered. This was the first real step toward reclaiming what was mine, my house, my reputation, my life. I knew she'd try to come back with more lies, more manipulations, but I was prepared. I'd made copies of everything, documented every move she made, and had my lawyer ready for whatever she threw at me next. The aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. I kept thinking about how I'd been so naive, how I'd trusted her, how I'd believed in our future. Now I was trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what to do next. I knew I couldn't just go back to normal, not after everything she'd done. But I also understood that I had to move forward, no matter how painful that was. I started working on rebuilding my life. I reached out to friends and family, told them the truth about what had happened, only what I could prove, of course. Some of them were shocked, others furious on my behalf. I also began to think seriously about therapy. I needed to process all the betrayal, the loss, and the anger. I couldn't let this consume me. Most of all, I realized I had to let go of the hope that she'd change or come back remorseful. That part of me had to die. What I needed now was to focus on myself, my healing, my future. I knew I'd be by this, but I also knew I'd come out stronger. I'd learned the hard way that trusting blindly is dangerous, and that some people are capable of doing terrible things behind your back. In the end, I'd say this whole nightmare taught me a lot about resilience. I learned that even when everything seems lost, you can claw your way back if you stay true to yourself and fight for what's right. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't be the same person I was before. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I've survived something most people never will, and I have a new perspective on trust, loyalty, and the importance of standing up for yourself. Whatever happens next, I'm ready for it. The court's decision finally came through a few weeks later. It was everything I'd hoped for, affirming that Lisa's signatures were fraudulent, invalidating her claims to the house, and ordering her to pay back the money she stole and covered damages for the lawsuit she filed. Honestly, the relief was overwhelming. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the paperwork, feeling like I could finally breathe again. It wasn't just about the money or the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from the chaos she'd created. But even with the legal victory, I knew the emotional scars wouldn't heal overnight. The betrayal ran deep. The trust I once had in her, in what we built, was shattered beyond repair. I felt anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation all at once. It was like I'd been through a war, and though I'd lost a lot, I'd also gained clarity. I realized that I'd been living a lie, one I'd let her spin for years. But now I was free from that deception. I also made a conscious decision to cut ties with Lisa completely. Moving forward, I wanted nothing to do with her, not for revenge, but because I knew I needed to focus on myself. I changed my phone number, blocked her on social media, and told my friends that I didn't want to hear her name again. I didn't want her to have any more power over me. I had been her pawn, her victim, and now I was reclaiming my independence. The process of rebuilding wasn't easy. There were days I felt overwhelmed, haunted by memories, or angry at how she'd manipulated me. But I also started to rediscover myself. I got back into hobbies I'd abandoned, working out, reading, even trying to reconnect with old friends I'd distanced myself from. Slowly, I was finding my footing again. The pain didn't disappear, but it became part of my story, a lesson in resilience and strength. Looking back, I realized that the biggest lesson I learned was about the importance of vigilance. Trust is fragile, and people can hide their true selves behind a mask for a long time. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight hard for what's right, even when it feels exhausting. Standing up for yourself, demanding justice, and refusing to be a victim, those are the things that truly matter. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I want you to know, you're not alone. It's okay to feel broken, betrayed, or lost, but don't let that define you. Take control of your life. Gather your evidence, seek help, and fight for what's rightfully yours. The road to healing is long, but it's worth it. Trust me, you can come out the other side stronger, more aware, more resilient, and finally free from the lies that tried to destroy you. As for me, I can finally say I'm starting fresh. The house is sold, the legal mess is behind me, and I've begun to rebuild my life on my own terms. I still have scars, but they're reminders of how far I've come. I've learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals come from those closest to us, but we can survive, we can fight back, and we can find happiness again. I don't know what's next, but I do know I'll face it head on because I refuse to let her win. I've taken back my life and I'm never giving it up again.